Today we are honored to welcome Matt Johnson to the show today. He's a hypnotherapist and he has an amazing story I would love to have people hear and kind of learn from to kind of implement things in their own lives, right? He helps people with so many different tools, really taking control of their mind. Because as we say in the show, it's really the foundation of our lives. If we don't have control of our mind, we can't really control our reality. So very excited to have him on the show today. He talks about NLP, so many different tools, and I'm very interested to hear his story. How are you today, man?
I'm loving life, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. As I said, I'm very curious to hear your story and how you got into hypnotherapy, NLP, all these tools. Like, that would be awesome to hear.
Yeah. In 2016, I got a severe brain injury. I was hiking with my kids at a place called Point Loma Tide Pools here in San Diego, and I slipped and landed at the back of my head on a slab of solid rock. I hit so hard, my brain rebounded, slammed in the top of my skull, and it twisted the part here above my eyes. Brutal pain. If you've ever been zapped by electricity and felt that intense pins and needles type feeling, that's what was going on in my head. For the next several years, I was so sensitive to light and sound, I couldn't even be in a room with the lights on. It was just too painful. And so I spent my first couple of years reading every medical study I could get my hands on, just trying every harebrained tactic, from amino acids to hyperbaric oxygen, and just trying to heal myself. I went through 4 different neurologists. The first one told me there's nothing I could do for you, and tried to schedule me for a repeat visit. I'm like, why would I come back to you if there's nothing you can do for it? Just, I didn't say that out loud. Just, it didn't make sense to me. But on to neuro number 2, he gave me a pill that made me worse. And so I called him the next day, and he gave me another one that made me better. Took the sting out a little bit. I'm like, cool. Can you give me something to help me sleep? Because I was going through these brutal cycles where the pain made it hard to sleep, which made the pain worse. And I would just, it was not a fun process. And
Yeah.
he's like, no, there's nothing I can give you for sleep. So on to neuro number 3. And right away she says, oh yeah, let me give you amitriptyline. And it worked. And I was able to get a decent night's sleep. And I'm beyond grateful to my doctors. I would not be where I am without them. But the only reason I tell that story is how many people would have stopped with that first one. You know what I mean? It's if you're facing some kind of a serious health challenge, you've got to do 2 things. Number 1, you've got to decide where you're going to be. And the word decide comes from the Latin root de, which means from, and caedere, which means to cut. When you make a true decision, you cut off any other possibility. I had no idea what it was going to take to get me out of that dark room, but I just knew I wasn't going to stop until I found it. And so when that first guy told me there's nothing I can do for you, all right, you don't have my answer. That's cool. Who does? You know what I mean? But after a couple of years of that, I got to a point where I created a three-page document of all the remedies that helped me. I presented it to the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation. I give both the document and the presentation out for free. If you know anyone who's got a brain injury, hit me up. I'll shoot that to you, no problem. But I started to realize that on the tiny little topic of a brain injury, I knew more than my neurologists, which terrified me because I realized medical science was not going to get me where I needed to go. So at that point, all right, medical science doesn't have my answer. Who does? And so I started branching out. Despite being a total skeptic all my life, I started looking into like energy medicine and things like that. Now, fortunately for me, I live in California, so I had a lot to choose from. And so I got into it, and one of the first things I tried was called Reiki. And I told you I had like that pins and needles feeling in my head. The best description I can give is she took those pins and needles and kind of made them fly in formation, if that makes sense. I was like, whoa, I have no idea what you're doing, but please don't stop. So, I mean, that sting was gone for the first time. And at the end of the session, I asked her, can you teach me how to do that? And so I spent a few days with her, got trained up in Reiki. I got into pranic healing, Qigong, Silva holistic faith healing, just anything I could find that would help me. I tried to just dive in and, get good at it. And I started to turn the tide. I did a huge amount of healing over the next couple of years, but I just could not shake that light and sound sensitivity. It was just, I couldn't go out and live my life. You know what I mean? It was just too painful. And at this point, I'm thinking, do I have permanent damage? So I start digging around again, and I found a special type of brain scan. It's done by Dr. Daniel Amen. It's called a SPECT. Regular MRIs will just look at the tissue, which doesn't really tell you a lot with a brain injury unless you got something like really wrong. A SPECT actually maps the electrical activity in the brain, and it will show, in his books, he shows like Alzheimer's patients scan, it looks like they got a hole in their brain because those areas have stopped functioning. So I go and get my scan, and long story short, my brain was okay, but areas that were supposed to be dark were lit up like fireworks, and I was diagnosed with PTSD that day. Looking back, I'd had it, most of my life and never even realized it. I knew I had anxiety issues, but I'd never, put that label to it. And right away, I knew what was happening. And with a brain injury, the name of the game is bringing your brain waves down to give your brain a chance to rest and repair itself. My PTSD was keeping me in fight or flight and sabotaging the healing process. And so I knew if I wanted to beat the brain injury, I had to beat the PTSD first. Yet again, I had no clue how I was going to do that. But I'd already tried several talk therapists and meds at that point, and they just, I knew that wasn't my path. And so I was familiar with Tony Robbins and NLP and some of the crazy stuff he can do, and also hypnosis. I'd watched my dad get hypnotized after a 30-year smoking habit. He smoked a pack a day. He tried pills, patches, gums, you name it, and failed every single time until he got hypnotized. One hypnosis session, he told me he never even craved cigarettes again. So knowing the power of this stuff, I go and I got quadruple certified as a hypnotherapist and NLP coach and all that. And I peppered every single teacher I had with the exact same question: how do you heal PTSD? And they all tried to help me, but none of them really had the answer. And so I knew I had to go, geek out again and start digging. I wound up spending about 2.5 years going through course after course, NLP and hypnosis, just down so many rabbit holes I can't even count. And I finally put together a protocol that healed me. And about 6 months later, I finally healed my brain injury. And it wound up, this sounds really weird, and I don't want another one, but the brain injury wound up being a huge gift, because I never would have discovered the PTSD, and I never would have found my calling if I hadn't gone through that. I love this stuff. I can obviously talk about it all day. Anthony's trying to get a word in edgewise here. But yeah,
I love it,
that's
man. That's absolutely incredible. You shared so many nuggets of wisdom in there, and something you mentioned in the beginning of that. I said, if you have a severe condition, don't just take the first opinion, right?
Right.
Because often these doctors, they mean well, but if they don't have the same goal as you, if you want to get well and they're telling you you can't, you need to find someone else. And it's exactly what you did. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and I've seen this before. I've worked with some people from the Brain Injury Foundation and things like that, and I noticed, there are some people who, they've absolutely, like I said, made that decision to heal, and they'll try anything. They'll dive right in, go full out, and, all right, that didn't work, next. And I've seen other people who just kind of, throw their hands up, and I don't blame them at all. Some of them, way worse off than I was. But when you do that, when you make that choice, then you're pretty much choosing to stay where you are. So, it's your life. You get to live it, but how do you want to live that? There's, we've all heard, stories of like miracle healings and things like that. I'm not, I don't know one way or the other about the miracles, but I do know the power of the mind is absolutely incredible. And you can, that power can be negative and work against you, or you can harness it to create your own miracles. And so, yet another long-winded answer, but
100%. I love that, man. Like, you mentioned something so powerful, and that's you decided. Like, you made a decision within yourself. You had this internal conviction.
Yes.
And even though the circumstances don't look like you can get well, it doesn't really matter, because you said you're going to find a way.
Right.
Out of curiosity, like, what do you think makes that person make a decision in that moment, like, I want to get well? Because I find that most people, when they have this severe diagnosis, they don't make that decision, and they kind of live this life of misery, it seems.
Yeah. There's a great book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where he talks about, he was in Auschwitz. He was a Jewish psychiatrist in Auschwitz, watched his family die and all that. he talked about the people who got there and just gave up did not last long. The people who got in there, and he called it creating a compelling future. When they did that, it's, I'm going to get out of here just so I can tell the story so this never happens again, or something along those lines. Those were the ones that made it. And it's that compelling future that you have. For me, it was, I wanted to be at my kids' weddings. You know what I mean? I would always imagine myself dancing at their weddings. It's going to be different for everybody, I think. If you have kids or things like that, then your motivation is pretty straightforward. You want to do it for
Absolutely.
them. My kids, I watched my dad go through his dark night of the soul. I hope not, but there's a chance that they'll go through theirs. I wanted to be an example of how to pull yourself out of that, so they could look, all right, what did dad do? All right, I can do the same thing. That was my biggest motivation.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want to be the model and the life for others, and that's a great inspiration for overcoming your own story. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you explain to people exactly what hypnotherapy is and how it can benefit people in their own lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Hypnosis is just where the conscious mind kind of steps aside and the subconscious becomes more accessible. Once that happens, we can rewrite those subconscious programs. By your 30th birthday, up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors are driven by your subconscious. If you think about the first time you drove a car, your hands were 10 and 2, you were hyper focused on not hitting anything. You had to be, right? Fast forward a few years and, you got coffee in one hand, cell phone in the other. I'm kidding, please don't do that. But, how did that process become so automatic? You know what I mean? Most of us have had the experience of driving and realizing we haven't even been paying attention, right? So how did you not crash? Your subconscious learned how to drive. It does that for everything that you do, repetitive. Awesome process for driving, but problems can happen when we hand it things like, bad habits, limiting beliefs, negative emotions, things like that. When we teach it how to do that, then we got a problem. Then that's when, hypnosis and NLP are the tool set for going in and rewriting those programs to help you overcome fears, phobias, stress, even physical pain, bad behaviors, things like that. NLP is kind of like an owner's manual for the mind. It's short for neuro-linguistic programming, by the way. It's a set of tools that help you discover how you use your mind, how you do those subconscious processes, and also how to change them. So, for example, I work with a lot of people who have memories that haunt them. They'll play them repetitively, or things like that, intrusive thoughts. The first thing I do is help them tune into, all right, how are you doing that? Where are you holding that picture? Is it to the right or to the left? Is it above you, below you? How big is it? How bright is it? How, is it color in black and white, flat or 3D? Once we tune into it, then we can start to change it. It's like, all right, take that picture and shrink it down so it's the size of a postage stamp. And that will usually, give them instant relief. I'll have them dump a bucket of white paint on it or send it way out on the horizon so it's just a little dot. What we're doing, your subconscious controls everything in your body that you don't have to think about: your breathing, heartbeat, body temperature, how much insulin you create after a meal, also that pit in your stomach that you get when you think about something that's unpleasant. The reason you can do that with a thought is because your subconscious controls everything going on in there. And so what we're doing is we're taking those processes and giving them a visual component, right? We're tuning into that picture. And once we do that, we can start to play with it. We can do that with stress, inner critic, all kinds of stuff. Procrastination, imposter syndrome, you name it. It's just tuning into those processes. How are you doing them, and then making the changes we want, so you're compelled to do the behaviors that you want. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. So it sounds like it can help with a wide array of conditions. Do I have that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like working with the operating system of the brain. It's, your subconscious is, it's thousands of times more powerful than the conscious mind. And most of what it does is, by definition, under the radar, right? Subconscious. And so once we get that toolkit of going in and, tuning into how you're doing those processes, you can take control of just about anything.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask a few questions about the mind in of itself.
Yeah.
Like, Is there a difference between the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind?
It's different terminology. Some people, as far as unconscious, some people don't want, they think subconscious is kind of, I don't want to say a derogatory term, but sub usually means inferior, which it's not. It's thousands of times more powerful than the conscious mind. There's really not a difference. You've got your subconscious, it works just like a computer. Whatever programs are in there, what it's going to run. It doesn't think. Your conscious mind, which has a fraction of the horsepower, but it's a critically important part because it does all your thinking and creativity for you, and it's what hands those programs off to the subconscious, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'm being politically incorrect by calling it subconscious still, but just
To my understanding, like the difference was the unconscious is kind of like our ingrained patterns, while the subconscious is kind of like beliefs, values, or maybe it's a semantic thing.
My understanding is that it's semantics. Those patterns and stuff are in subconscious. There could be a dichotomy there. I'm not aware of it if there is one.
Okay. Is there a difference between the mind and the brain?
Ooh, interesting. I have a hypnosis that I do. The short answer is yes. You have your patterns that you run out. Those are part of your mind. It's one of the coolest things I get to do is when I work with somebody one-on-one. Neurons that fire together wire together, and we're talking physically here. They will. The reason habits become so automatic is because you've got like a super highway of neurons that are all fused together in your brain that can bring it up. That behavior instantly. All those patterns and things that are in your mind. I have an exercise where we kind of pop out of that and we watch you running out your patterns, and I have you reflect on who is it that's doing the observing, right? It's those, we all have, it's kind of a spiritual fingerprint, if you will, in my opinion. And it's the observer of all those things. And it's, unless you're heavy duty into meditation or things like that, Deepak Chopra's got some really cool stuff on this, going into the space between those thoughts, that automatic monkey mind that's always chattering. Getting into the gaps between the thoughts, you don't really, most of us don't really realize, that's not really a part of us. That's a part of the conditioning we've picked up along the way, if that makes sense.
Point. For sure. And is the mind, like, where's it located? Is it just like consciousness? Is it including the body? Like, what is
there is there's a good book, The Intention Experiment, by Lynn McTaggart, who she talks about. It's basically, if you look at your brain like an electrical engineer would, it's really designed, the electronics in there are designed to be controlled from outside of it. It's kind of like a remote control type thing. I am far from an expert on this. I kind of like to nerd out on it, but the theory is, if you've seen the movie The Matrix, not that far off. There's no evil robots out there, but we're kind of, quantum physics and neuroscience are both kind of converging on the same thing, saying that, there's more to us than what we see and experience right here. We're kind of projecting our consciousness in, if you just look at it again like an electrical engineer would. So the short answer, I don't know, but we're starting to see some strong evidence towards that.
100%. So when you see people with these conditions that are like very difficult to cure, they've been handling things for a long time, and they don't really know how to get well. What do you see in terms of results with NLP and hypnosis in your practice?
Okay, we talked before about the power of the subconscious mind, but we just barely scratched the surface of it. We've all heard about the placebo effect, right? They've got to do one for a drug to pass the drug trials. A lot of times, the placebo effect, when people are getting nothing but a sugar pill, can have up to a 70% cure rate. for diseases. We talked about the pit in the stomach, the tightness in the chest. Your subconscious mind controls everything that goes on in your body. Bruce Lipton wrote a really cool book called The Biology of Belief, where he talks about beliefs can reprogram our DNA, controlling what genes are switched on or off. Dr. Bernie Siegel did really fascinating research with multiple personality disorder back in the day, where his patient's eye color would actually change, going from brown to blue and back. Scars and physical markings would disappear and reappear depending on what personality was coming through. That's how powerful your subconscious is. And again, that power can be negative and work against you, or you can harness it to get the subconscious on your side. Now, if you're facing a tough issue like that, we all want to recover. But my question to you is, what do you actually imagine in your mind when you think about that illness or about recovering? How do you think about that condition, or what's going to happen to you from it? What pictures do you see? Again, let's tune into that. What words do you use? What feelings do you get? If you're seeing yourself in bed looking sick, then you've got yourself a problem, right? We can go into fixing that really quick if you'd like to.
What fixing what exactly?
Yeah, fixing that picture.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, think about that. Whatever health issue you have. Again, how do you think about it? What pictures do you use? What words do you hear? What feelings do you get? Again, where do you flash that picture in your mind? To the right or to the left? Is it a picture or is it a movie? How big is it? How far away? Is it in color or black and white? Flat or 3D? Clear or fuzzy? Are you in the picture seeing everything through your own eyes, or are you outside the picture like you're watching on a movie screen? Now hold that thought for just a second, and I want you to notice where it's located and all the stuff we just went through. But I want you to think about something that you absolutely know that you'll recover from automatically. It's going to heal on its own without you doing anything, like a cut, a scrape, a mild cold, something like that. Think about that for a second and notice how you do this differently. Is the picture to the right or to the left? Again, how big or how far? Color, black and white, flat, 3D, clear, fuzzy. What differences can you notice? The big one is location. But what you want to do is take this image of the illness or whatever, and we're going to teleport it, move it over to wherever you're holding this image of you healing automatically. And we're going to make it exactly like that new picture, the color, the brightness, the black and white, the size, the location, all of it. Take it, move it over there, and just snap it in. Now, that right there, again, this is not a substitute for medical care, right? But it's a good addition to it, because we're getting that subconscious power on your side, right? And just like that pit in your stomach, we just made a change. What you want to do is, anytime you think about your condition, illness, whatever, think about it in its new location, and with its new, decked out in its new stuff. And your subconscious mind will get the message, hey, we're supposed to heal this. To lock in the change, you can, if it's a physical injury, you can imagine that you're a stunt man or stunt woman that's hired to make a movie of how you got hurt. You're well prepared. You've got padded clothes and all the tricks of the stuntman trade, and then re-experience that event without being injured. You just bounce right off, right? Play this movie 10 times, and you'll have 10 movies in your subconscious of you not being hurt versus one of you being hurt. That will start to change how your body reacts to it, how you heal.
Makes a lot of sense, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
can definitely see how it's so powerful, because the mind is really the foundation. And
Yes.
I always like to say, like, when it comes to chronic illness, there's always an emotional component. If it's not the cause,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
It depends. So I definitely believe it's always a factor.
There's a
And-
great book called Answer Cancer, where he talks about like cancer and is a result of what he called a sensitizing event. In other words, trauma, right? It's a shock to the system. And people who have cancer, he talks about in the book, they're also a cluster for autoimmune stuff and all kinds of other diseases. It's the body that's trauma is stored physically. Another great book on that is The Body Heals, The Body Keeps the Score. But your trauma is actually physically stored in your body. And so, if you've been through something like that, you need to get it out of the body. Obviously, exercise is great for doing that. Yoga, things like that. You want to physically flush that stuff out of the body, but you also have to deal with the mental processes that are creating it. Right, just like we created that pit in your stomach. It's also, if you do get rid of it, if you don't get rid of the mental patterns that were causing it, you're just going to recreate it. So you got to have a holistic approach, mind and body. Absolutely.
Definitely. It sounds like with NLP, what you're doing first is gaining a lot of clarity on the problem. Do I have that right? 'Cause you're asking all these introspective questions and
Yes.
kind of getting clarity on the issue. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're making unconscious processes conscious. Once we make them conscious, we really tune you. You've been playing those pictures all along. You just never really, tuned into them the way we're doing here. Once you do that, then you can start to make changes.
Sure, yeah, because it starts with awareness. Because as you mentioned, like we have these unconscious programs that we're just not really aware of, and we
Yes.
have these repetitive thoughts, repetitive questions, and repetitive emotions. Right?
Yes,
It's every single
absolutely.
day, and until we gain clarity on that, we can't really do anything to change it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the average person has, I think, 60,000 thoughts a day, something like that. 90-something% are the
Something like
same
that.
ones they had the day before. You know what I mean? And so it all starts in the mind, though. Changing the mind, and again, 95%, that 95% behind the wheel is subconscious, and so it's getting in and changing those patterns, with the right tools.
Yeah. So you also talk about willpower and
Yeah.
how that plays a role. Like, what is your take on willpower, and is it a limited resource? Like, how can we fit that into this type of work?
Willpower is it's a muscle. And the more you exercise it, the stronger it's going to get. But it also is finite. It depends on things like how much sleep you got, how much glucose is in your system that day, things like that. The way you want to get around it is just to align yourself with whatever the goal is. Everything we do is done to either avoid pain or gain pleasure. Those are the two things we're always striving towards. If you have an away from pain strategy, which does not make you a negative person, our culture wants us to be positive and all that, so people get hung up on that. These are two different things. About 80% of us have an away from pain motivation strategy. I'm one of them. It just means that we don't really get that fire lit under us until we feel enough pain, and that's when we get moving. If you are in that category, what you want to do is think about, worst case scenario. All right, if I don't do this, if I don't get up and go to the gym, I'm going to be overweight. I'm going to be, tired, and when I get old, I'm going to have to use a walker and all this, and imagine yourself winding up in a wheelchair, sitting in a nursing home. Make it as painful as you can, so when that alarm clock goes off, first thing in the morning, you've got an image to flash on that'll get that fire lit under you. You don't want to stay there, though. That would make you a negative person. As soon as that fire's lit, then you want to switch to your positive motivation. And all right, I want to get buff because I got this reunion coming up, or I want to look for the beach, or whatever that is for you. Whatever would truly motivate you. It's going to be different for everybody. But knowing those two things, away from pain and towards pleasure. If you're an away from pain person, that motivation is only going to last as long as you're close enough to the pain. So in other words, if you get far enough away from it, that pain, the motivation is going to dissipate. That's why some people, they get really, in the gutter or whatnot. They're on fire for a while, and then they, kind of climb out of it, and they're not quite to their goal yet. They're in no man's land, but they just kind of chill out. It's like, all right, I'm not feeling the pain anymore. I can relax.
Yeah.
That's why you need to use both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So it sounds like pain is kind of like a push motivation.
Yes.
But pleasure is kind of pulling you towards something. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One of my favorite examples of this, Arnold Schwarzenegger, back in his early bodybuilding days, his upper body was huge, but his legs were like sticks. And if you think about it, your legs carry your body weight thousands of times a day. It's really hard to shock them and make them grow, right? That's the problem he was having. So he, worked out with all these other bodybuilders and, copied their routines and all that. He said, eventually I figured out it wasn't the routines, it wasn't the weight that they were using. He said the difference was I had to learn to love to train legs. And that's when it took off and he became who he was. You've got to learn to love it. My example of this, I had a point in my life where, my kids were still small. I was working two jobs, and the only time I could go to the gym was if I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That is not easy to do, And so I did the pain and pleasure thing, but I set myself up to win with two things. Number one, if you think about everybody's New Year's resolution approach, what do? I'm going to starve myself and work out 6 hours a day, right? With that type of an approach, I would maybe last a day two, maybe three. But what I did instead was I took where I was and just did little 2 millimeter steps every single day. If you're intimidated to go into the gym, maybe just go in and swipe your card, and maybe day two you try a machine or something like that. But just starting where you are, just make a tiny little shift and just do that every single day. If you improve 1% a day, that percentage is not 365 at the end of the year. It snowballs on top of each other, and it becomes 3,700%. That's 37 times improvement in 1 year just by improving 1% per day. Wow. So using those two approaches, 2 millimeters, and the second one is fun gets done. Like I was talking about before, you got to make it fun. Now, at the time, I'd just been introduced to Tony Robbins' world. I was listening to his programs all day, and I love playing basketball. That's my sport. So I always had Tony in my ears, and I always ended my workouts by shooting hoops for 10 minutes. And so those were the things that I flashed on. That was my pleasure motivation. And in 6 years, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I can count on one hand the number of workouts that I missed. Wow. Just using those two approaches.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, what you mentioned there is so many people, when we want to change, we just kind of do everything all at once, it seems.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why we fail. I mean, that can work in some cases, but for the most part, I think it's good to like focus on some things, right? Maybe two or three.
Right.
And just work on incremental improvements every single day. Focus on those small wins, and that's how you make progress. Because you're actually you're not falling off. Like people, they start and they stop. They start and they stop. But if you just keep making progress every day, that's what's really at.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't want to try to take on too much pain at once, because it is hardwired in our nervous system, that whole pain and pleasure thing. Yeah. It is really tough to overcome. So as long as you take the pain out of the equation, you'll do much better. My experience with the gym back in the day, I always try to leave with a little bit left in the tank. And, with a week or two of doing that, you're like raring to go back in. It's a weird experience, but your body's like craving going back in. It's crazy, but it's all about just knowing yourself. If your idea of exercise is opening your mail, maybe try opening both sides. But just start wherever you are and just make that tiny little shift every single day. And before long, it's like a hockey stick. It's your progress curve. It'll be very slow at first, but then it'll start to go vertical. And when it does, you just take off like a rocket.
Yeah. Is one motivation more powerful than the other, or more sustainable, do you think?
It depends on who you are. I think it's intrinsic. There might be a way to change it. I'm not aware of it, but it's about 80% of us are going to be away from paying people. Would you do more to earn $100,000 or to stop someone from stealing $100,000? Right? Your answer to that question will tell you whether or not you're a pain or pleasure person. And either way is fine. You want to use both, like we're talking about, but it's just knowing yourself. And, if you're a towards pleasure person and you try to use away from pain strategies, you're just going to get annoyed, right? It's right. if you're away from pain and you try to use these pleasure, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. You know what I mean? It won't even phase you.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's just knowing who you are and working with it.
Yeah. And when it comes to willpower, I want to mention like stacking conditions in your favor, right? So we don't have
Yes.
to like constantly use up our mental energy for things. And when we actually have a real challenge and we can actually be ready for it, right? So like
Mhm.
nutrition, for example, if you want to change your diet, just do not have all the processed food in your cabinet. It makes it so much
Yes.
easier. So you don't have to constantly be resisting things. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. Also, getting the result in advance. What movie are you playing to yourself, right? All addictions, whether that's food, alcohol, drugs, video games, whatnot, they all have one thing in common. It's the person who's addicted plays a mental movie that ends with them getting their fix. If you take, I actually do this in an exercise. If you take that movie and expand it, say, all right, extreme example, say, somebody's addicted to heroin or something like that. Take that movie that ends with them, getting that fix and expand it to, okay, I'm going to, lose my family, my friends. I'm, going to lose my job, probably be homeless, laying in an alley, shaking from withdrawal symptoms, all alone and crying, right? Start to play that movie, and the answer to do I really want another fix will start to change. Now that's a hardcore addiction, but you need a little more intervention than that. But if you use that for eating a cookie, or do I really want to skip the gym today, something like that, just take that movie and expand it. All right, how am I going to feel the rest of this day? I'm going to feel sluggish if I don't go to the gym, or I'm not going to be as sharp, not going to have as much energy for my kids. Whatever's going to impact you. Again, it does not matter what that is. It's just, it motivates you. That's what you want to work with.
100%. As you mentioned, like becoming aware of our tendencies and proclivities to things and
Yes.
shining a light on that so we can actually move forward. And
Yeah.
as you've been talking about, just creating our own mental movie of where we actually want to be. Like, I think it's important to walk around as a winner. Like, walk around
Yes.
with this internal conviction within yourself. Like,
Yes.
I find, like, if you want to become someone, like, become, like, a better version of yourself, you have to act like it right now. That's where it
Yes.
all starts because all you have is right now, anyways.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Fake it till you make it. Right. It's there are some hacks to that. If you need to feel confident, there's a really cool YouTube video. Amy Cuddy, she's a researcher. She did a cool TED talk where she talks about power poses. If you think about every athlete, every sport on earth, every culture, what pose do they all hit when they get that big victory? V is for victory, right?
Right.
It's hardwired into our nervous system. People who have been blind since birth will hit that pose when they get a victory. It's just part of who we are. A variation of this is called the Wonder Woman pose. And if you're too young to remember Wonder Woman, just Google her. It's head up, shoulders back, hands on your hips, elbows flared out, right? That's the Wonder Woman pose. Her research showed holding either one of those poses for 2 minutes causes an increase of testosterone by 25%, which testosterone is the hormone of confidence and dominance, and a decrease in cortisol by 25%. Cortisol is the hormone of stress. Just holding a pose changes your biochemistry, literally. And so you can, if you want to feel confident, all you got to do is put your body in a confident position and you'll naturally become confident. Tony's big on that too. He talks about that a lot. It's, getting yourself in state. If I told you I had a depressed person, you could probably tell me a lot about them without even seeing them, right? Would their head be up or down, right? Shoulders back and tight, or would they be drooped forward? Would they be breathing deep or shallow? Right? We all know this because we've all done it before, right? You can reverse engineer that process. Take someone who's excited. All right, how are they standing? Are they, head up, shoulders back? Are they breathing really deep? You can put your body into that position, and your emotions will automatically go there. It is an incredibly powerful process. Anthony, I told you before we started this interview, about Tony and how he had, cured me of depression. That's how he did it. He taught me how to hold my body. And I told you I was in that dark room, stuck in there for a couple of years, right? I knew this what we're talking about going in, and being alone in the dark with nothing but your thoughts is a pretty tough environment. I had black hefty bags taped over the windows. At first, I couldn't even look at my computer or my phone. It was just too painful. And so I was, sitting in the dark with my thoughts. In prison, they call this solitary confinement. Definitely not easy. But my wife can attest to this. I stayed on a natural high while I was in there, just from holding those poses, V's for Victory and Wonder Woman. And also, there's another trick. Years ago, Berkeley did a study where they took manic depressives, these people who were maxed out on depression meds, right? And they were still depressed. They had them do one thing. Every day, 30 minutes, look into a mirror and grin so big they could eat a banana sideways, right? At the end of that study, not only did every one of the participants report not being depressed anymore, a lot of them were actually able to kick their meds. I'm not encouraging that. Please don't do that without your doctor's permission. But how could something so simple be so powerful? It's, again, you're holding your body in the position of someone who is happy, right? And looking in the mirror activates what's called mirror neurons, where you've probably noticed before, emotions are contagious, right? So if we smile at someone, they tend to smile back. You know what I mean? And so we see someone smiling at us, we're going to smile back, and it just the process reinforces itself. And that was ingenious study, but again, that's the incredible power of the body also to to affect our moods.
100%. So what is the power of confidence, and how does it interplay with identity? Like how, the identity we carry around as who we are.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to go on another long-winded answer. There was a fascinating study. They took two groups of people. One of them reported being very lucky. The other reported being very unlucky. And one by one, they took them to a restaurant, and they put a $20 bill on the floor in front of them before they got there. Without exception, all the lucky people spotted the 20. And also, without exception, all the unlucky people just filtered it right out, just missed it totally, because unlucky people don't find $20 bills laying around, right? So that's how powerful our beliefs are. It's called a perceptual filter in geek speak, but it will control what you even see. So if you're walking around and you're unconfident, you're down on yourself, things like that, you will not even perceive opportunities to level yourself up or get that goal that you're after or whatnot. It's kind of like a salesperson knocking on 100 doors and saying, you wouldn't want to buy this, would you? You know what I mean? That's not going to work, right? But, again, if you use your body, hit that pose, smile at yourself, whatever you need to do, get that confidence, that will radiate to people. And when you're confident in who you are and what you're selling, people can smell that and they will buy from it.
Yeah. Is that also known as RAS?
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah, reticular activation system. Yeah, your five senses can take in, it's like 11 million bits of information a second. The color of the walls around you, the blood rushing through your big toe. You filter most of that right out, right? Your conscious mind can only handle like a couple hundred. And so what happens is your reticular activation system, it's like a giant filter, and it works like Google. You've probably had the experience of buying a car and all of a sudden you start seeing that car over and over again, right? Did everybody rush out to buy your car so they could be cool like you, right? No. That car was always there. It's just you gave your brain an emotional impact. Say, oh, this is important. I'm going to bring this to your attention from now on. And that's why you start spotting the car. That's your RAS in action. And so if you're programming it with garbage, I'm a loser, I'm, whatever, if you're down on yourself or your situation or whatnot, you're going to find more and more evidence of that. If you are, encouraging to yourself and upbeat and positive, hey, we're going to make this happen, or, whatever that happens to be, you're going to find more and more evidence of that. Compound that over years and years, and you're talking a totally different life.
Yeah, what you focus on tends to expand.
Exactly. Yes.
Another key to identity, I believe, is actually keeping your word to actually doing what you say every single day. Like waking up and staying in integrity with yourself, like doing what you say, like not slipping up on habits. And that is a process in of itself, because it's a learning experience. Like you're not going to be great off the get-go, but if you keep on like persisting and believing in your vision, your dream, everything that we kind of talked about in a sense, just make progress every single day. Like that's how you build confidence and your self-worth essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. You will meet your musts in life. Most people, I should work out. I should, eat healthy. I should do this. Should. We should all over ourselves, right? it, what you make a must is what you're going to meet, right? I must do this. It is mandatory. You will find a way to make it happen. It's motivation plus imagination in that case. But when you make it a must to keep your word to yourself, you're going to get a lot more picky about what you say to yourself. it's, because it's, every time that you don't follow through, it's just more evidence to your subconscious of, oh, I'm somebody who doesn't follow through. You know what I mean? And, keep doing that over and over again. You take in the identity of being a procrastinator or things like that. And again, those perceptual filters will kick in, those habits, and you will become what project. That's the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. Yeah, holding that high standard within ourselves, like having high standards, and things that you accept and things that you don't accept, right?
Yeah.
Things that you value, like this is just self-assessment at its core, and it's how you kind of filter everything that you do in your life. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's different for everybody. It's but you touched on the really important part is your values. You want to get really crystal clear on what your values are. You only have so many trips around the sun, and how do you want to live them? And reverse engineer from that. You want to pick the important stuff. It's there was Tony had a story of he was in a room of this one guy was a CEO, mega successful guy, but he was miserable. And Tony asked him, "What do you need to be successful?" And he said, "I need to make $6 million a year. I've got to have 5% body fat, six pack, all this stuff." He had so many rules for him to be successful that he was making himself miserable. He's probably the most successful guy in the room. Another guy, his rule was every day above ground is a great day. Right. So how easy is it to succeed with that rule? You know what I mean? So you want to be, again, really crystal clear on what do you value, what kind of life do you want to live, and, make those your musts, right? You want to be really strategic.
Yeah, I think that's the paradox of success in a sense. Like, I think it's important to accept where you are, but it's also the nature of life to grow and strive for more. It's like, both of those exist simultaneously, but I feel like most people have a hard time grasping that concept, and it's either or in a sense.
Yeah, it's it's a good thing to have a goal, but if you haven't, you've seen the pictures of, everybody thinks success is a straight line, but here's what it really looks like is, a pit with alligators in it, and all this stuff, you know what I mean? All these mountains you got to climb, and that's true. Most of us in our early years, especially, school systems, teachers, I love you too, but, it's school systems teach us that failure is bad. And that could not be further from the truth. Failure is part of success. If you avoid failure, you avoid success. Show me anyone who doesn't fail enough, and I will show you, someone who, on the success ladder is a pretty low rung, because they're not trying very hard.
That's right.
You've got to, success is just, failures. They're feedback. They show you what step of that staircase that you're on, and they show you where you need to improve. That's all it is. It shouldn't be anything emotional, anything like that. It's like, all right, I messed up. Here's where I am. Move on. I have been guilty of the opposite. I've lost a company before, and I beat myself up for 2 years. I turned my insides into, it's like putting them through a meat grinder. And I beat myself up so bad that, my confidence coming out of that was like nothing. You know what I mean? I had to really, work on it. I hadn't gotten into this type of work yet, but it's knowing where failure's feedback, know where you are, and be cool with that. Be positive, supportive. Take that 2 millimeter shift approach, and just keep working toward it. Just as long as you never stop, you'll never fail.
Yeah. Like what's in the way becomes the way. You kind of alchemize all these challenges and these failures into success, and you don't really see it as separate anymore. Even though,
Right.
like, it can be hard because sometimes you hit, man, with that one hitter, and it's like, I don't, man, is it really? But yes, like, but then you start to develop this resilience within yourself. You can handle all these little things that used to mean a lot. Now, it's like you said, it means nothing to you. It's like, just what's next, because you
Yeah.
have this internal sense of resolve within yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's yeah, and one of the exercises I do is called the inner critic, where a lot of people. One of the coolest quotes I've ever heard: "Your reaction when you bump up against the edge of your comfort zone will determine your destiny." And what that means is, if I get to the edge or outside my comfort zone, I take that to mean, oh no, I need to retreat. I need to get back. You will always stay within that zone. Right. If fear is the great indicator. No fear means you're not growing. If you're feeling some fear, you know, an, an amount that you have an appetite for, that you can handle gracefully. But if you're feeling some fear, that means you're on the right path. Right. So
100%.
it's just reinterpreting, what those messages your brain's giving you.
Yeah, I love it, man. All right, Matt, this has been awesome. I appreciate you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your insights with us. You have an amazing story. I'm very glad to get out to people today, because when we hear other people's stories, it can be very healing. And, when we see people who have gone through their story and become a light for other people, and we're in this dark place, it just makes it like, hey, this is actually possible. And like we mentioned before, just take the next step and just keep moving forward. And if you don't stop, like, you're going to reach your destination at some point. And as you mentioned in the beginning, it's about having the internal resolve. Like, you made a decision. And no matter what, like, yeah, there's going to be challenges and things like that, but you have this modus operandi of freedom, in a sense. And you're going to find a way and become that light. So I appreciate you, man. And thanks for sharing your gifts with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I know people are wanting to learn more about you and your work. So where can we find you?
You can go to Matt Johnson NLP. That's MattJohnsson NLP for Neuro Linguistic Programming. I have a free NLP course where we'll do 13 different exercises where we'll take you through, unspinning fear and stress, undoing limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, stop, worrying about, what other people think of you, things like that. And it's basically a highlight reel of the most requested items that I get. But yours for free. Just go to the site.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it. And again, thank you. It's been really awesome to get this out to people. So appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
All right.